Paris, January 26th, 1906. That evening on Avenue du Bois, France's most prestigious street, an unnatural silence prevailed. The massive wrought iron gates of the palace at number 50 were closed. Usually at this hour, hundreds of electric lamps shone here, and a line of carriages stretched to the Arc de Triomphe. But today the windows were black. Count Boniface de Castellane, Europe's most famous dandy, returned home and discovered that his key no longer fit the lock. He knocked. The door was opened not by the butler in livery with gold braid, but by a bailiff. Inside the palace, which the press called the Pink Marble Wonder, it was cold. Furniture worth entire fortunes was covered with white, dusty sheets. Paintings by Rembrandt and Van Dyck had been removed from the walls. Silver services for 300 people had vanished. There were no servants, no wife, no children in the house. On the table lay only one paper, a divorce notice. Thus ended the most sensational society fairy tale of the Belle Époque. Over 11 years of marriage, this man spent $10 million. In today's money, that's about $360 million. He didn't build railroads. He didn't discover oil fields. He didn't fund scientific discoveries. He spent money on velvet, tapestries, parties, and his own portraits. He squandered the fortune that his father-in-law had earned with blood and cruelty at a rate of $30,000 a day. Imagine that figure. $360 million dissolved in champagne and antique furniture. This is not a story about love. This is a story about the greatest robbery, disguised as a marriage. Boni de Castellane believed he had married a bag of gold, to which a small, unattractive, and silent American woman was attached. He thought he had bought himself a king's life, but he made a fatal mistake. He forgot to check whose blood exactly flowed in his wife's veins. And in her veins flowed the blood of Jay Gould, the most hated man in Wall Street history. A man who could destroy a country's economy for his own profit. Anna Gould was not a victim. She was her father's daughter. For years, she kept the ledger of their marriage, recording every infidelity, every franc spent, every humiliation. And when the debits no longer balanced with the credits, she simply closed the account, turned off the lights, and put the Count out on the street in the same suit in which he had come. Today, if you go into the Dior boutique on Place Vendôme, you will see showcases with dazzling jewelry. The creative director of Dior's jewelry department is Victoire de Castellane. She is the great-great-granddaughter of our hero. The irony of fate is simply incredible. Her great-grandfather destroyed a fortune by buying beautiful things, while his great-granddaughter built a career and a name by creating them. History has come full circle, but the price of this circle was monstrous. We stand on the ruins of one of the greatest American dynasties. Of their palaces, only black and white photographs remain. Of their billions, only court records. But to understand how one can squander the budget of a small European country in a decade, we need to go back. We need to go where this money was created. Not to shining Paris, but to dirty, noisy, and cruel New York at the end of the 19th century. There, a man named Jay Gould died of tuberculosis, clutching in his hands a will that was supposed to protect his children, but ultimately became their curse. The Romans said, "Money has no smell." But the Gould's money did smell. It smelled of railway smoke, betrayal, and fear. And soon this smell will cover the best salons of Europe. To understand the tragedy that will unfold in Parisian salons, one must first smell the money on which this tragedy was bought. And this money did not smell of French perfumes. It smelled of fear, printing ink of fake stocks, and the cold sweat of ruined investors. The man who created this mountain of gold was named Gould. In history textbooks, he is politely called an industrialist. But on the streets of New York at the end of the 19th century, he was called differently: Mephistopheles of Wall Street. He was the complete opposite of the lifestyle that his children would later lead. Gould was a small, frail man with a black beard and piercing dark eyes that seemed never to blink. He did not build palaces for boasting. He did not throw balls. He did not drink champagne by the rivers. He suffered from chronic dyspepsia, insomnia, and ate rusks with warm milk while ruining competitors who breakfasted on oysters. His fortune, estimated at $72 million at the time of death, which today, in terms of economic power, would equal tens of billions, was built on a philosophy of absolute predation.
Gould did not create a product. He seized control.
The most vivid example of his methods, Black Friday of September 24, 1869, Gould decided to buy up all the available gold in New York to drive up prices. His scheme crashed the stock market. That day, hundreds of brokers went bankrupt. Some committed suicide right in their offices, and the country's economy was paralyzed for several months. Gould had to hide from an enraged crowd ready to lynch him, under the protection of a private army. He emerged from this crisis richer than before and utterly unperturbed. It was in such an atmosphere that Anna grew up. She was not a princess from a Disney fairy tale. She was the daughter of a man whom all of America hated. The Goulds lived under siege. Their mansion on Fifth Avenue resembled a fortress.
Gould,
knowing that New York's high society, the old Dutch families like the Astors and Vanderbilts, despised him, created an isolated world for his children. He loved them fanatically, painfully. Anna was his favorite. He saw in her his own character: silence, stubbornness, and a cold, calculating mind. In their country estate Lyndhurst, a neo-Gothic castle on the bank of the Hudson, he taught her not etiquette, but survival. Lyndhurst was a gloomy place: pointed towers, dark wood, stained glass. Gould spent hours in his orangery, tending to orchids. This was a metaphor for his life. He grew beautiful but parasitic flowers that sucked the juices from other plants, just as he sucked assets from the Erie and Union Pacific Railroad companies. Gould understood one thing that would prove prophetic. His money was a target. He knew that as soon as he was gone, the hunt for his children would begin.
fortune hunters, swindlers, impoverished European aristocrats,
all of them were already sharpening their teeth, eyeing America's richest heiress. In 1892, Gould's health finally gave out. Tuberculosis was consuming his lungs. He was dying in his Fifth Avenue home, surrounded not by friends, but by lawyers. Even on his deathbed, he tried to control the future. He drew up a will that was supposed to become armor for Anna. Gould did not simply leave money to his children. He placed the entire fortune in trust funds. The conditions were strict. Heirs could spend only the income from the capital, interest and dividends. The principal capital, those same $72 million, was to remain intact. This was a brilliant move by the old schemer. He seemed to foresee the appearance of a man like Boni de Castellan. He understood that his children, raised in greenhouse conditions, would not be able to preserve the money earned in the jungles of capitalism.
December 2nd, 1892.
Gould takes his last breath. He was only 56 years old. Newspapers came out with headlines full of barely concealed glee. But for Anna, this was the end of childhood. At 17, she became an orphan. her mother had died earlier, and the possessor of a fortune that made her the most desirable prey in the world. She was small in stature, with sharp features, stooped and unsociable. Society chroniclers whispered that she was ugly, but when the notary announced the figures, Anna Gould suddenly became the most beautiful woman in New York, in the eyes of hundreds of bachelors. The annual income from her share of the inheritance amounted to about $700,000. In terms of modern realities, this is more than $20 million in pure cash per year, deposited into the account without any effort. Her father left her instructions on how to protect the money.
But he did not leave instructions on how to protect the heart.
Anna, raised in the shadow of America's most hated man, craved what could not be bought on the stock exchange: recognition, status, and entry into history not as the daughter of a robber baron, but as a great lady. And it is on this vulnerability that the one who was already sailing across the Atlantic would play. A French aristocrat who had not a penny to his name, but had a family name rooted in the Middle Ages, and self-confidence capable of moving mountains. The old predator had died, and a new, much more sophisticated parasite was approaching his nest. Jay Gould built an empire for eternity, but he did not account for his daughter wanting to buy herself a title that cost more than any railroad. Jay Gould's death acted like a starting pistol. While the body of the great schemer was cooling in the family vault at Woodlawn Cemetery, a marble mausoleum that was an exact copy of a Greek temple and cost more than an ordinary American earned in 10 lifetimes, in the world of the living, a new era was beginning. An era that Mark Twain would call, with biting irony, the Gilded Age. Not golden, note. Gold is a noble and solid metal, and gilding is the thinnest layer of shine, concealing cheap iron, rot, or emptiness beneath. The Gould heirs entered this age not just rich, they were absurdly, indecently rich. In their hands were resources capable of changing city landscapes and the fates of nations. But if the father used money as a sword to conquer power, the children began to use it as a shield against boredom and inferiority complex. In New York at the end of the 19th century, a brutal civil war was raging. But it was waged not with cannons, but with calling cards and dinner invitations.
This was the war of old money against new.
On one side of the barricades stood Mrs. Astor and her 400, a closed list of families whose ancestors had arrived in America before the Revolution. They despised the Goulds. For them, Jay Gould was a vulgar upstart, a highway robber who had bought himself a suit but could not wash the machine oil from his hands. The doors of the best Fifth Avenue homes were closed to Anna and her brothers. They were not invited to the main balls of the season. In the opera, their box might be the most expensive, but neighbors demonstratively turned away when the Goulds entered the hall. This social rejection created a vacuum that needed to be filled, and Anna, the quiet, stooped girl with her father's heavy gaze, found a solution. If America would not accept her as a queen, she would buy herself a crown elsewhere. She went to Europe. In 1894, Paris was the world capital of pleasures, art, and, most importantly, impoverished aristocracy.
It was the perfect market.
On one side of the Atlantic were colossal industrial fortunes without titles. On the other, ancient European families with coats of arms from the Crusades era, but whose castles were crumbling from dampness, and whose ancestral estates were pawned to moneylenders. This was the most cynical barter in history: dollars in exchange for DNA. It was at this moment that our main hero takes the stage. Or, more precisely, the main anti-hero. Count Marie-Ernest Paul Boniface de Castellane. For friends, simply Bonnie. He was 27 years old. He was handsome, with that refined, almost feminine beauty that was in vogue in the era of decadence. A powdered face, perfect light moustache, a corset under his tailcoat for posture, and hands that had never known physical labor. Boniface de Castellane was the living embodiment of French history.
His ancestors fought at the Battle of Agincourt, and his great-uncle was Talleyrand himself, the legendary diplomat who redrew the map of Europe. But Boney had one problem. He was bankrupt. And not just poor, but poor on a grand scale. He lived on credit with such elegance that creditors were embarrassed to demand money from him. He believed that paying bills was the lot of the bourgeoisie. "I was born to command, not to count," he liked to repeat, ordering another batch of silk shirts. Their meeting in the spring of 1894 at the home of a mutual acquaintance, Fanny Reed, was not accidental. It was a carefully planned operation for capture. Boney saw Anna and instantly assessed the situation. He did not see a woman in her. He saw in her the golden calf that could be ridden. In his memoirs, written years later with disarming audacity, he confessed, "She was small, ugly, and silent, but her eyes shone with intelligence, and behind her stood the shadow of $70 million. Boney began the hunt. He did not give her banal bouquets. He gave her what she had never had, the feeling of being chosen. He took her to museums, but not as a tourist, but as the owner. He showed her antique tapestries and said, "This should hang in your living room." He criticized her outfits, but did so in a way that Anna felt not offense, but gratitude for the lesson in taste. He became her Pygmalion. He sculpted a French aristocrat out of the daughter of a railroad magnate. For Anna, raised in her father's harsh Puritan atmosphere, Boney was a creature from another planet. He was light, brilliant, witty. He knew everyone. Dukes bowed to him on the streets. Princes called him by name. Next to him, she ceased to be the daughter of that terrible Gould and became part of the great history of France. This was a drug against which a 19-year-old girl had no immunity. However, the Gould family, and first and foremost the elder brother George, who managed his father's trust, sensed something was wrong. George Gould had inherited his father's suspiciousness. He looked into the young count and was horrified. The dossier on Boney de Castellane was full of debts, mistresses, and a reputation as a spendthrift. George tried to intervene. He told his sister directly, "This man loves your wallet, not your soul." But it was too late. Anna, usually so compliant, showed the iron Gould character. She declared that she would marry Boney, no matter the cost. Humiliating, purely commercial negotiations over the marriage contract began. This was not the engagement of lovers, but a corporate merger. The Gould lawyers built a line of defense. They refused to give Boney control over Anna's principal capital. No access to the body of the inheritance. Only income. Only interest. Boney was furious, but had to agree. Even just the interest from Anna's fortune amounted to about $700,000 a year. In modern money, this was the budget of a small town. This should have been enough for any luxury. So Boney thought. He simply did not know how to count. On March 4th, 1895, the wedding took place in New York. It was an event of national scale. The crowd of onlookers around the Gould house was so dense that the police had to disperse people with batons. The newspapers wrote about the deal of the century. The Archbishop blessed a union that was built on lies from the first minute. Anna, in a dress worth thousands of dollars, embroidered with pearls, walked to the altar believing she was buying a ticket to high society. Bonnie walked beside her, mentally calculating how quickly he could pay off his gambling debts and begin construction of the palace of his dreams. Neither of them looked at each other. Everyone looked at the decorations.
And no one at that moment could imagine that this marriage would become the most expensive catastrophe in the history of Parisian high society. The mechanism was set in motion. The Gould money, accumulated on the construction of railroads in America's wild prairies, now flowed like a river across the ocean to be flushed down the sewer of French vanity. The Gilded Age was coming into its own, and its main heroes had just signed a contract with the devil. New York slammed its doors in Anna Gould's face, but Paris flung them wide open. Or, more precisely, Bonnie de Castellane kicked those doors open with a boot shod in pure gold. As soon as the steamship with the newlyweds docked in France, the most sophisticated social operation of the 19th century began. Bonnie understood the rules of the game better than any strategist. In America, money was everywhere, so old-fashionedness and lineage were valued there. In Europe, there was an excess of lineage, but a shortage of money. Bonnie became the ideal converter. He took the Gould's dirty dollars, smelling of coal and sweat, and turned them into sparkle, style, and grandeur that took the breath away from Parisian high society. Their first apartment was on Place des États Généraux, but for Bonnie's ambitions, it was merely a cramped cage. He needed a stage. He needed scale. 1896. To make a statement, Bonnie decides to host a reception that would enter the textbooks of social history. The occasion was Anna's 21st birthday, but the true goal was a demonstration of power. This was not a party. This was a coronation. The venue chosen was the Bois de Boulogne, the famous Tir aux Pigeons Club. Bonnie rented it entirely. The budget for this one evening amounted to 80,000 francs. To give you an idea of the scale, at that time, a qualified worker in Paris earned about 5 francs a day. In one night, Bonnie burned an amount on which an ordinary French family could have lived comfortably for 43 years. Close your eyes and imagine this scene. Bonnie ordered 15 kilometers of carpet paths to be laid directly over the grass so that the hems of ladies' dresses would not get dirty on the ground. The trees in the forest were hung with 80,000 Venetian lanterns, creating the effect of a glowing, unreal paradise. Fountains shot up from the lake, illuminated by electricity, a technology that still seemed like magic at the time. 250 footmen served the guests. But Bonnie could not simply hire waiters. No, that would be too banal. He dressed them in the liveries of the Talleyrand house, crimson coats with silver braid and white powdered wigs. He turned living people into decorations from the era of Louis XV. Everyone flocked to this light. 3,000 invitations. The guest lists featured not just the rich, but monarchs. The highlight of the program was the visit of the heir to the British throne, the future King Edward VII. When the Prince of Wales bowed to the small, ugly Anna Gould, the social war was won. New York snobs who had turned up their noses at her on Fifth Avenue now read in the newspapers how the daughter of the robber baron dined with future kings. This was a triumph. But it was a triumph bought at a robber baron rate. Bonnie did not just spend money, he reveled in it. He used Anna as a mannequin. In his eyes, she was not a wife, but a hanger for family jewels. He dictated everything to her: how to stand, how to speak, what to wear. He forbade her to wear glasses, although she was severely nearsighted, because he believed that frames spoiled the aristocratic line of the face. Anna stumbled, squinted, but obeyed. He ordered dresses for her from Worth.
but chose the styles himself, making her stand on the stairs for hours to check how the train would look from the perspective of guests standing in the hall. This was total objectification. Anna was the most expensive accessory of Count de Castellane, but rented halls were not enough for Bonnie. He needed his own Versailles. And here begins the chapter on the most insane construction project of the era. Palais Rose, the Pink Palace. Bonnie acquired a plot of land on Avenue du Bois, today Avenue Foch, number 50, the most expensive street in Paris. He hired architect Ernest Sanson with a simple task: build a house that would make the Louvre look modest. The model was the Grand Trianon at Versailles, the residence of kings. This construction became a black hole for the family budget. Bonnie demanded perfection bordering on madness. Marble was brought from the same quarries where stone was mined for Louis XIV. If the shade of the stone did not please the Count, he ordered the slabs broken and new ones brought. The staircase, a grand double helix of polychrome marble, became the symbol of this house. It was designed so that the person descending it would look like a deity coming down from heaven. Inside the palace, a private theater for 500 seats was installed. Not a living room with a piano, but a full-fledged theater with a stage, curtains, and orchestra pit. The walls were paneled with panels removed from ancient mansions that Bonnie bought across Europe, dismantled and transported to Paris. He bought history in pieces and assembled it in his home, like Frankenstein assembling his monster. As the walls of the Pink Palace rose, so did Bonnie's appetites. He became the chief collector of antiques in France. But he was not a museum worker who preserves exhibits. He lived among them. He ate from plates that had belonged to Marie Antoinette. He sat in chairs that remembered the warmth of the bodies of French monarchs. For him, this was fundamentally important, not to preserve, but to consume. He wanted to prove that he was the only legitimate heir to this luxury, and the entire 19th century, with its revolutions and democracy, was merely an annoying mistake. Anna watched this feast of the spirit with growing unease. She was a Gould. She had a calculator in her blood. She saw that the construction bills had already exceeded $3 million, more than $100 million in today's money, and the house was still unfinished. She saw antique dealers' vans pulling up to the grand entrance daily, bringing tapestries, statues, and paintings that cost more than the annual income from her trust. But for now, she remained silent. She was pregnant with their first child. She was at the center of attention from all of Europe. She had gotten what she wanted: a countess's title and the adoration of the crowd. But she began to notice that in this vast, marble-shining world, she was utterly alone. Bonnie loved the public, loved the effect, loved his reflection in the golden mirrors, but he was completely uninterested in the one who was footing the bill for this banquet. In Paris, they whispered, "Count de Castellane built a golden cage for the American birdie." They were wrong. This was not a cage. This was a mausoleum built for living people. Cold, pompous, and utterly inhuman. The social war was won. The Goulds had entered the elite, but the price of victory turned out to be terrible. Anna realized that she was not the mistress of this palace. She was just an ATM that Bonnie kept in the bedroom. And while the Count enjoyed his triumph, pacing the unfinished halls of the Pink Palace and giving orders to the architects, in the silence of Anna's study, an invisible timer began to tick. The mechanism launched by her father, the capital protection mechanism, was beginning to awaken. The social ascent was over. The fall into the abyss of personal hell was beginning. To understand the depth of the pit into which Anna Gould voluntarily jumped, we need to step away from personal experiences for a moment and look at the macroeconomics of the late 19th century. What happened between Anna and Boney was not an isolated incident. It was part of a gigantic transatlantic conveyor belt, exchanging liquidity for genealogy. In history textbooks, this phenomenon is called by the romantic term dollar princesses. But if we strip this name of its Hollywood melodrama overlay, a picture of cynical slave trading wrapped in silk and lace will emerge before us. The market situation was as follows. By the 1890s, the old European aristocracy faced an existential crisis. The agricultural depression crashed land prices, the main asset of dukes and counts. Their castles, standing for centuries, required repairs, roofs leaked, and there was nothing to pay the servants with. They were rich in history, but poor in fact. At the same time in America, the class of robber barons, Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, Goulds, rose. They had mountains of cash, but lacked what could not be bought in a store: class legitimacy. In the eyes of the old elite, they remained plebeians. And then the market found a solution: the perfect barter. A European title in exchange for an American trust fund. According to statistics, from 1870 to 1914, more than 450 American heiresses married European aristocrats. More than £1 billion flowed into the British economy through these marriages. This was the Marshall Plan of its time, only it saved not countries, but specific dying lineages. Winston Churchill, by the way, was the son of one such dollar bride, Jenny Jerome. But if Churchill's parents had love, in the case of the Goulds, there was only mathematics. Back to Anna. In the winter of 1895, negotiations were taking place in New York that resembled the merger of two hostile corporations more than wedding preparations. On one side of the table sat the Gould lawyers, led by elder brother George. On the other, representatives of Bonny de Castellane. The subject of the bargaining was Anna. Bonny did not hide his intentions. He was frank to the point of impudence. He needed money to pay off his colossal debts accumulated over years of a beautiful life in Paris. The amount of debt was $200,000. In modern money, this is about $7 million. Imagine a groom who comes to the bride's parents and says, "I'll take your daughter if you pay off my $7 million in debts." And the family agrees. But George Gould, the manager of his father's legacy, set strict conditions. He understood that Bonny was a financial black hole. Therefore, a marriage contract was drawn up that would become the key document in our story. Attention to detail. According to the contract, Bonny received full payment of his debts, but the main body of Anna's capital, those same $15 million, almost $500 million today, remained in trust. Bonny had no right to touch the principal capital. He was granted the right to dispose only of the income from it. This seemed like reliable protection, but George Gould underestimated the appetites of the French count. The income amounted to $700,000 a year. Bonny looked at this figure and decided it was infinity. For him, it was not a budget to allocate, but pocket money. The signatures were placed. Anna Gould officially bought herself the right to be called Countess de Castellane. Boniface de Castellane officially sold his name to avoid debtor's prison. March 4th, 1895. New York. J. Gould's mansion on Fifth Avenue. This was a wedding that everyone talked about, but few would want to be in the bride's place. The crowd of onlookers on the street was so huge that the New York police set up a cordon 3 blocks away. People climbed lampposts to see how America's richest ugly duckling married the beautiful prince. Inside the house, the atmosphere was stifling. The huge hall had been turned into a greenhouse, crammed with orchids and palms. The air was heavy with the scent of expensive flowers and tension. Anna descended the staircase in a Worth dress, embroidered with pearls and lace. Around her neck hung a necklace of perfectly matched pearls, a gift from her father, worth $500,000, about $15 million today. She looked like an idol laden with offerings, small, pale, with frightened eyes. Beside her stood Bonnie, tall, stately, in an impeccable tailcoat, with the Legion of Honor on his chest. He shone, but not from love. In his memoirs, he would later write words that chill the blood. She was beautiful, as a bearer check can be beautiful. The ceremony was conducted by Archbishop Corrigan. When he pronounced the words, "Till death do you part," silence hung in the hall. Many guests, including those who despised the Goulds, understood. What was happening here was not a sacrament, but a crime against humanity. Anna was buying the illusion of love. Bonnie was selling the illusion of grandeur. Immediately after the ceremony, the banquet began. The menu was composed with French refinement, but American extravagance. Terrapin, turtle soup, pheasants, champagne flowing like a river. But at the main table, cold reigned. Anna hardly ate. She looked at her brand-new husband, who was already occupied. He was charming the guests, dispensing smiles, and behaving as if this were his benefit performance, and Anna was merely a decoration required by the script. Anna's brother, George, watched the proceedings grimly. He knew that he had just handed his sister over to a man who saw people only in their utilitarian function. But even he could not imagine the scale of the catastrophe. On that day, Anna Gould ceased to be simply a rich heiress. She became a tool. Boney looked at her and saw not a woman, but the foundation for his future palace. He saw in her the opportunity to realize his wildest aesthetic fantasies. The deal of the century had taken place. America gave money, Europe gave style. The victim in this deal was human dignity. The next day, the newlyweds boarded a steamship sailing to France. Anna stood on the deck, watching the New York shoreline recede. She was leaving behind the city that had rejected her, and the country that hated her for her father's sins. She believed she was sailing into a fairy tale. She believed that the title of Countess would protect her from pain, and her husband's refined manners were a sign of nobility of soul. She was wrong. She was sailing toward the most expensive lesson of her life. The ship was carrying her to Paris, where 11 years of humiliations covered in golden powder awaited her, and where every kiss from her husband would cost her about $1,000. The Gilded Age was cruel. It taught that everything must be paid for. But Anna did not yet know that the bill Bonnie de Castellane would present to her would include not only money, but also her soul. If Anna and Bonnie's marriage was a deal, then their home became its physical embodiment. Welcome to Avenue du Bois, now Avenue Foch, number 50, the most expensive, most beautiful, and most unhappy address in Paris at the beginning of the 20th century. Here, on a plot of land worth more than gold, the Palais Rose, the Pink Palace, rose. Forget everything you know about luxurious mansions. Houses in Wróblewka or Beverly Hills look like garden sheds compared to this place. Bonnie de Castellane was not just building a house. He suffered from megalomania, backed by his wife's unlimited credit card. He decided that he deserved to live no worse than kings, so he ordered architect Ernest Sanson to build an exact copy of the Grand Trianon in Versailles. But make it better. Construction lasted 6 years. 6 years of dust, clamor,
and bills that made the Gould accountants in New York twitch their eyes. Let's walk through this architecture of madness. The building was clad in pink marble, brought from the same quarries that supplied stone for Louis XIV. But that was not enough for Boney. He was a perfectionist to the point of pathology. Once, arriving at the construction site, he noticed that the cornice, at a height of 15 meters, had a shade half a tone different from the columns below. He ordered the entire facade demolished and redone, at Anna's expense, of course. This whim cost 100,000 francs, a price at which a school could have been built. We enter inside.
The main element of the house became the honor staircase, escalier d'honneur. This was a reconstruction of the famous ambassador's staircase of Versailles, destroyed back in the 18th century. Boney restored it from ancient engravings, a double flight of polychrome marble adorned with bronze statues. Ascending it, a person was supposed to feel like a deity. But Anna Gould, ascending these steps, felt like a dwarf. The architecture of the house worked against its mistress. 8-meter-high ceilings, mirror galleries, endless enfilades of halls. All this was created for the tall, stately Boney. Small, stooped Anna got lost in these volumes. She looked like a random tourist who had wandered into a museum after closing. The furniture was not just expensive, it was historical. Boney snapped up authentic Gobelin tapestries from the Gobelin era, bureaux crafted by royal cabinet makers, paintings by old masters. He turned the house into an antiques warehouse. But you can't live in a museum. The armchairs were too precious to lounge in. The carpets were too ancient to walk on in street shoes. A special place was occupied by the home theater. Not a living room with a piano, but a full-fledged opera theater for 500 seats, built into a residential house. Stage, backdrops, dressing rooms, orchestra pit. Here, performances were given by the best artists of the Comédie Française. Imagine the absurdity of the situation. You descend to breakfast, passing by a theater that is larger than most city cinemas. But the scariest thing in this palace was the cold, both physical and emotional. The heating system, designed in the 19th century, could not cope with the huge marble halls. In winter, drafts roamed the palace. Anna often complained about the cold, wrapping herself in shawls, while Boney claimed that beauty requires freshness. He didn't care about comfort. The picture was what mattered to him.
Let's talk about those who kept life going in this monster. The staff. To service the Pink Palace required an army, from 60 to 80 personnel. It was a state within a state, with its own rigid hierarchy. At the top of the pyramid stood the major domo. Below, valets, footmen, maids, cooks, sous chefs, dishwashers, grooms, gardeners. Boney dressed his footmen in the liveries of the Talleyrand house, bright red tailcoats with silver buttons and white powdered wigs. Think about it. It was the beginning of the 20th century. Cars drove outside the windows and telephones rang, but inside number 50 on Avenue du Bois, people walked around in 18th century wigs. This was a theater of the absurd. Each servant had a clear, sometimes meaningless function. There was a special person responsible only for polishing the silver, and there were tons of it. There was a person who dealt only with buffing the parquet in the ballroom. There was a maid whose sole duty was to iron the morning newspapers for the Count, so that the printing ink wouldn't stain his white gloves. Anna paid for all of this. The monthly payroll for the servants amounted to thousands of dollars. But the most humiliating thing was that these servants belonged to Boney. They idolized him. The Count was charismatic. He knew how to smile at a footman to make him feel part of the greatness. Anna they feared, and, according to rumors,
despised. Behind her back, they called her the Little American or the Bankress. She lived in a house where even the walls and people worked for her husband. Anna's isolation in this palace was absolute. She had her own apartments, but Boney regularly invaded them with his decorators. "This color doesn't suit your skin tone, madame," he would say, and order the silk wallpaper repasted. She had no corner of her own. Even in her own bedroom, she was part of the exhibit. The most eerie room in the palace was the dining room. A huge table, capable of seating 50 people. When the spouses dined alone, they sat at different ends of this mahogany aerodrome. To pass the salt, one had to call a footman. Conversation was impossible without raising one's voice. "How was your day, Boney?" Anna shouted. "Splendid, dear. I bought a stunning 16th century tapestry today," he replied, without even lifting his eyes from the plate. "By the way, the bill will be sent to your secretary tomorrow." Echo carried their voices through the marble vaults, turning the family dinner into negotiations between two strangers in an empty train station. It was here, amid the gilding and velvet, that Anna began to understand the nature of her loneliness. The house overwhelmed her. It was the third wheel in their marriage. Boney loved the Pink Palace more than her. He caressed the marble railings with greater tenderness than his wife's hand. He could spend hours discussing the shape of a door handle with the architect, but he had no 5 minutes to listen to Anna's story about what she felt. The Pink Palace became the symbol of Boney's power and Anna's prison. From the outside, it was a wonder of the world that all of Paris envied. Tourists stopped at the wrought iron gates, trying to glimpse the life of the gods. Newspapers wrote ecstatic articles about the revival of great French style. But no one saw what happened when the chandelier lights went out. In the darkness, the huge halls filled with silence that pressed on the ears. Anna wandered the corridors of her golden mausoleum, hearing only the creak of the parquet and the chime of antique clocks. Clocks that counted down the time to the inevitable collapse. She bought herself a palace to become a queen, but she ended up walled alive in the most expensive tomb in human history. And, like in any Gothic story, ghosts began to appear in this castle. Not mystical, but quite real. Ghosts of infidelities, vice, and filth that would soon flow from under the doors of luxurious bedrooms, flooding this perfect parquet. If from the outside the Pink Palace shone like a polished copper basin, then inside it began to rot at a frightening speed. In architecture, there is a concept of dry rot, a fungus that devours load-bearing beams from the inside, leaving the outer surface untouched. This is exactly what was happening to Anna and Bonnie's marriage. Only instead of fungus, this house was devoured by 3 things: boredom, lust, and pathological narcissism. By 1903, Boniface de Castellan had completely lost touch with reality. He believed in his own impunity. In his distorted view of the world, Anna was not a living person, but a perpetual motion machine generating gold coins. And since the engine was running smoothly, there was no need to think about it. The Count's day began at noon. His morning toilette took 2 hours. This was a sacred liturgy of self-admiration. The valet served him shirts that were laundered exclusively in London. In Paris, in Boney's opinion, the water was not filtered well enough. He changed outfits 4 times a day. He had 300 pairs of shoes. 300 pairs. This was not just a number, it was a diagnosis. While Anna sat in the nursery with their sons, Boniface, Georges, and Jay, trying to give them at least some semblance of normal upbringing, their father worked. His work consisted of being Boni de Castellan. He got into a carriage and drove to the jockey club or fashionable restaurants, where he was already expected. But it was not business partners who awaited him. Women awaited him. Boni's infidelities were not secret. They were part of his public image. In the Belle Époque, having a mistress was considered normal for an aristocrat, almost a mandatory accessory, like a cane with an ivory handle. But Boni crossed the line. He did not just cheat. He did it with the same extravagance with which he built palaces. He chose the most famous, most expensive courtesans and actresses of Paris. And the most monstrous thing, he paid their bills with checks drawn on the Gould's American banks. Imagine Anna's humiliation. She opens the morning newspaper and in the society column reads about how her husband shone yesterday at the opera in the box of Mademoiselle Dancy, a famous actress of light behavior. And around this actress's neck gleamed a necklace bought with the money that Anna's father had earned building railroads in the dust and mud of the Wild West. Parisian high society, cruel and cynical, began to whisper. First quietly, then in full voice. "Poor Anna," they said in salons, hiding behind fans. "She bought herself a title, but forgot to buy a husband. Why should Boni come home? To look at that safe full of money?" He prefers to spend the contents rather than admire the packaging. Boni was cruel, not only in actions, but also in words. He did not hesitate to discuss his wife's appearance in company. He called her, "my little chimera." Once, when asked why he was so rarely at home, he replied with lazy grace, "The palace is splendid, but it has too many drafts and too little beauty, if you don't look at the paintings." This was a direct blow to Anna. But the women were not even the worst problem. It was the debts. The $700,000 of annual income, $20 million today, stopped being enough for Boni. His appetites grew in geometric progression. He began to gamble. Casinos and private gambling clubs in Paris became his second home. Baccarat, roulette, whist. He played all in. He lost overnight sums sufficient to buy an estate in Provence. When cash ran out, he borrowed. Moneylenders lined up for him. Why did they lend money to a man who clearly could not repay it? Because behind him stood the shadow of Gould. Creditors believed that Anna, that quiet, submissive mouse, would always pay. They believed that scandal was worse for the Goulds than bankruptcy. Boni accumulated credits for 4 million gold francs on top of what his wife provided. He pledged everything he could: future income, his word of honor, the family reputation. He began selling items from the house: silver candlesticks, rare books. Things disappeared from the Pink Palace as if dissolving into thin air. Anna saw this. And here occurs the most interesting transformation of our heroine. In the first years of marriage, she cried. She tried to earn love by buying him gifts, hosting receptions, striving to be the ideal countess. But by 1904, the tears dried up. In their place came something else, something that Boni overlooked in his arrogance. Gould awakened in Anna. You can't crush genes with a finger. Her father was a man who could wait years for the moment to strike. He was a master of cold calculation. Anna stopped having hysterics. She fell silent. She became an observer. She began to compile a dossier, not in a figurative sense, but in the most literal. Anna hired private detectives. She began documenting every step of her brilliant husband. While Boni caroused at Maxim's, an inconspicuous man with a notebook sat at the next table. Thursday, March 18th. The Count left the house at 1300, visited the Cartier jewelry house, purchased a sapphire bracelet. At 1600, the bracelet was given to Mademoiselle Liane de Pougy. Saturday, March 20th. Gambling club on Rue Royale. Loss, 50,000 francs. Debt note signed. Anna read these reports in her boudoir under the light of an electric lamp. Her face remained impassive. She kept the ledger of their marriage. Debit, 3 sons, title, palace. Credit, public humiliations, squandering of the fortune, risk of total ruin. The balance was negative. The enterprise called Family de Castellan had become unprofitable. And the Goulds do not hold unprofitable assets. They liquidate them. But Boney did not see this. He was too busy with himself. He considered Anna stupid. This was his fatal mistake. He thought that she was just a wallet on legs that wouldn't go anywhere, because divorce in Catholic France, and especially in high society, was unthinkable. It was social suicide. She won't dare, he thought. She is nobody without my name. The situation heated up to the limit at the end of 1905. Rumors of the Count's bankruptcy began to leak to the press. Creditors started to get nervous. Some, particularly brazen ones, began coming straight to the palace, demanding an audience with the Countess. Anna received them. She looked at the debt notes signed by her husband. She did not scream, did not faint. She simply nodded and said, "I will take note of this. Feel this moment." This was the calm before the storm. Bonnie continued to dance on the deck of the Titanic, ordering champagne and an orchestra, confident that icebergs would part before his greatness. And Anna was already sitting in the lifeboat. She already had her hand on the lever that would lower this lifeboat into the water, leaving the captain to sink with the ship. The last straw was not another necklace for a mistress. The last straw was that Boney began teaching their children to despise their mother. He teased her in front of the sons, mocked her American accent, her manners. He tried to turn them into little snobs ashamed of their origins. This, the daughter of J. Gould could not forgive. January 1906 was approaching, a month when Paris is usually cold and damp. But for Boney de Castellan, this January was to become the beginning of an ice age. He was planning another grand ball. He was discussing the menu, selecting wines. He did not notice how Anna's personal belongings began to disappear from the house. One by one, imperceptibly. Rot had eaten away at the load-bearing structures. The facade was still pink and majestic, but inside, there was nothing left but emptiness, and folders of compromising material lying in Anna Gould's safe. The denouement was inevitable, and it was to be as loud as their entire joint life. January 26th, 1906. This day should be circled in black marker on the calendar of every Alphonse, gigolo, and dowry hunter. Because it was on this day that Anna Gould gave the world a masterclass on how to destroy a man without spilling a drop of blood, but using only ink and cold calculation. This operation began not in the bedroom and not in the courtroom, but in the port of Le Havre, where several weeks earlier a steamship from New York had arrived. George Gould stepped off the gangway. Anna's elder brother, head of the family trust, and the man who inherited from his father not only millions, but also a bulldog grip. George did not come on a courtesy visit. He came as a crisis manager to liquidate a toxic asset. He saw his sister, exhausted, depressed, turned into a shadow. He saw the bills that Boney continued to generate, and he said the phrase that launched the destruction mechanism. "We are leaving. Now." What happened next resembled a military special operation. The Goulds did not make scandals. They did not break dishes. They acted in absolute secrecy mode. While Bony de Castellane fluttered through Parisian salons, confident in his inviolability, an evacuation was taking place in the Pink Palace. Anna gathered the children, Boniface, Georges, and Jay. She did not take with her any jewelry given by her husband, nor dresses that he had chosen for her. She took only the most valuable, the heirs and her freedom.
The cortege of carriages drove out of the palace gates and headed to the Bristol Hotel on Place Vendôme, where an entire floor had already been booked, under the guard of private detectives. And now, let's return to that scene with which we began our story, but now look at it through the eyes of the victim. Evening. Count de Castellane returns home. He is in a splendid mood. Perhaps he is humming an aria from the opera he just listened to. The carriage stops at the grand entrance. But something is wrong. The windows are dark. Usually at this time, the palace shines like an ocean liner preparing to sail. Bony ascends the steps. He pulls the door handle. Locked. He rings. No one opens. He knocks his cane against the oak panels. Silence. Ponder the horror of this situation for a man like Bony. He is an aristocrat who cannot even dress without the help of a valet. He stands before his own home, into which he poured his soul and his wife's millions, and this house rejects him.
Finally, the door cracks open. On the threshold stands not his personal valet, but an unfamiliar man in a strict suit. A bailiff. He silently hands the Count a packet of documents. "The Countess with the children has left the house, sir. You are forbidden from approaching her and the heirs. Divorce proceedings have begun." Inside the palace, emptiness. Anna ordered all the servants fired in 1 hour. 80 personnel disappeared, fireplaces extinguished, furniture covered with dust sheets. The Pink Palace instantly turned from a living organism into a cold crypt. Bony was left alone in the huge, dark building, where the only sound was the echo of his own footsteps. For Bony, this was a shock comparable to an apoplectic stroke. He was sincerely convinced that divorce was impossible. First, they were married in church, and the Catholic Church considers marriage sacred and indissoluble. Second, he was sure that Anna without him was nobody. "She won't dare," he thought. But he forgot that Anna was a Protestant, and, more importantly, she was American. For her, marriage was a contract. If one side breaches the terms, the contract is terminated. The next morning, the news tore through Paris like a bomb. Newspapers came out with extra editions. "The fall of the Castellane house!" screamed the headlines. Society was divided. The French aristocracy was horrified by the American audacity. How could one abandon a count? How could one throw a man out onto the street? But Anna paid no attention to public opinion. She was preparing for court. And this trial became the public execution of Boniface de Castellane's reputation. The process was dirty, long, and humiliating. The Gould lawyers dumped on the judge's table the factual dossier that Anna had compiled for years. These were not rumors. This was the accounting of debauchery. The judge was presented with evidence of marital infidelities, with specific dates, names, and amounts. Mademoiselle X, actress. Bracelet worth 20,000 francs, paid by check number such and such. Mademoiselle Y, dancer. Payment for an apartment on Boulevard Haussmann, bill from the Gould Bank. But the most terrible accusation was not infidelity, but embezzlement. The lawyers proved that Bony spent the children's money on his whims,
In France at that time, this was a serious crime against the family. The Count appeared before the court not as a romantic hero lover, but as an irresponsible spendthrift who put his son's future at risk. Boney tried to defend himself. He appealed to emotions. He spoke about how he had built an architectural masterpiece for France. He shouted, "I gave her a name! I introduced her to kings!" Anna's lawyer coldly replied, "You sold her a name, monsieur, and she overpaid." On November 5, 1906, the court issued the final decision. The divorce was granted due to the husband's fault. This was a complete rout. Anna received full custody of the 3 children. Boney received not a cent in alimony. Moreover, the court ruled that the Pink Palace was built with Anna's money and therefore belonged to her. The point of no return had been passed. The man who yesterday commanded footmen in powdered wigs and received kings found himself on the street. He was left with only his title, wardrobe, and debts amounting to 4 million francs, which no one intended to pay off anymore. The most dramatic moment came when Boney had to physically leave the palace. He was exiting through these doors, knowing that he would never enter here again as the master. He walked down the marble staircase that he himself had designed, touched the walls that he himself had chosen. He was losing not just a home. He was losing the stage, without which his acting talent had no meaning. Anna watched this from afar, from the hotel window. She felt no pity. The blood of her father spoke in her.
Gould destroyed competitors on the stock exchange without batting an eye. Anna destroyed her husband, who had betrayed her trust. But the story did not end there, because Anna Gould's revenge was a dish served not just cold, but icy. It was not enough for her to throw Boney out. She needed to replace him. And not just with anyone, but with a man whose status would cause Boney maximum pain. A figure of the next husband was already looming in the shadows, and when Paris learns his name, it will become the coup de grace to Boniface de Castellan's heart. The divorce was only the beginning. The real tragedy, the loss of face before his own kin, was still ahead. Anna Gould was just beginning her game on the European board, and the pieces for the next round were already in place. If you think the story ended with Bonnie de Castellan walking out the threshold of his palace with one suitcase, you don't know Anna Gould well, and you underestimate the irony of history. The most exquisite blow was not struck in the courtroom. It was struck in the church. 2 years after the divorce, in 1908, Anna remarried, and her chosen one was not just another aristocrat. She chose Élie de Talleyrand-Périgord, Duke of Sagan. Who was this man? He was Boney's cousin. Moreover, he was his main rival in high society. If Boney was just a count, Élie was a duke and prince. His title was higher, his lineage older. Anna did not just replace Boney, she upgraded. She stayed in the same family, but moved up a notch, turning Boney into the poor relative of his own ex-wife. This was, perhaps, the coldest and most calculating revenge in the history of marital alliances. But let's leave the boudoir intrigues and turn to the accounting of destruction. Because the 20th century was preparing for this dynasty a trial that neither titles nor the Gould millions could survive. A new era dawned, an era that hated palaces. First came the First World War, which washed away the splendor of the Belle Époque with blood in the trenches. Then, the Great Depression of 1929, which shook even the unshakable Gould trusts. And then, the Second World War. What happened to our heroes? Bonnie de Castellan, deprived of access to millions, accomplished the impossible. He did not become an alcoholic and did not commit suicide. He monetized the only thing he had left, his impeccable taste. He became an antiquarian and art consultant. He taught new millionaires to spend money the way he himself had spent it before. He wrote memoirs titled The Art of Being Poor, full of venom and self-irony. He died in 1932, a respected but not wealthy man. There were no thousands of guests at his funeral. The era of which he was the face died before him. Anna lived a long life. She returned to America in 1939, fleeing the Nazis, and died in 1961 at the age of 86. But the main tragic finale awaited not the people. It awaited the house. The Pink Palace, Palais Rose, that very marble monster on Avenue du Bois, was left orphaned. After Anna's death, it passed to her heirs, but by the 60s of the 20th century, the world had changed irreversibly. Inheritance tax, luxury tax, the cost of heating and maintaining a staff of servants made living in such a house impossible. The palace, built to shine forever, turned into a white elephant, an asset worth millions, but whose upkeep ruins the owner. In 1962, the family offered the French government to buy the palace for a sum laughably low compared to its real value, to turn it into a museum or residence for foreign ambassadors. The government refused. General de Gaulle and his culture minister, André Malraux, saw no value in the whim of an American millionairess. They did not protect the building with historic monument status. This was the death sentence. In 1968, the palace was sold to a development company. The deal price, the value of the land. The architectural masterpiece was valued as construction debris hindering the building of a modern residential complex. In the spring of 1969, heavy machinery arrived at the gates of number 50 on Avenue Foch. The most barbaric sale and destruction in Paris history began. Before demolition, an auction of the contents was held. It was like looting, legalized by the auctioneer's hammer. Chandeliers, under which kings danced, were sold at scrap metal prices. Marble fireplaces were pried out of the walls with crowbars. Wooden panels, 18th century boiserie, were dismantled and sold in parts to decorators from Texas and Saudi Arabia. Reader, imagine this sound. The sound when a steel wrecking ball strikes the pink marble facade. The walls that Bonny de Castellan erected over 6 years, demanding the perfect shade of stone, collapsed in a few weeks. The famous Honor Staircase, that very copy of the Versailles staircase down which Anna descended in diamonds, was too massive to dismantle and sell. It was simply smashed. Workers with sledgehammers pulverized the polychrome marble, turning a work of art into rubble. Parisians gathered behind the construction fence and watched as the legend vanished. Many cried. Journalists wrote angry articles, calling it cultural murder. But excavators cannot read newspapers. They worked on schedule. In just a few months, nothing remained of the Pink Palace. Not a single column, not a single brick. In its place, they dug a foundation pit and built a standard concrete glass residential complex that stands there today. Faceless, gray, functional. The Sotheby's auction, selling off the remnants of the collection, brought huge sums to the heirs, but these were dirty money. It was the proceeds from selling the tombstone of their own history. The fate of the items from the palace turned out whimsically. Tapestries went to the Getty Museums in Los Angeles. Furniture settled in private collections of Brazilian magnates. The huge palace gates, those very ones through which Boney entered his dream, were miraculously saved. They were bought by the Paris City Hall and installed in Parc Monceau. If you are in Paris, find them. This is the only thing physically left from Count de Castellan's ambitions. The destruction of the Palais Rose became a symbol of the end of an era.
It was the moment when the old world finally lost to the new. Beauty that brought no profit was deemed unnecessary.
Utilitarianism triumphed over aesthetics. Anna and Boney's heirs received their checks from the developers. Money flowed again from accounts to accounts, but the magic was gone. The millions earned by Jay Gould on railroads turned into a concrete box in the center of Paris. The mathematics of the curse worked flawlessly. Jay Gould, dying, wanted to create a dynasty that would rule for centuries, but he created only capital that, like acid, corroded the fates of his children and destroyed everything it touched. Boney de Castellane wanted to leave behind a monument to taste, but he left behind only dust on the builder's boots and black and white photographs in the archives. By the beginning of the 70s of the 20th century, only bank accounts and antique chairs scattered around the world remained from the great drama, on which people now sat who didn't even know the names of Anna and Boney. We began this story with a closed door, in front of which stood the ruined Count, and we will end it at a shining showcase where his great-granddaughter stands. Fast forward to the present day. Paris, Place Vendôme, the heart of world luxury. Here, among the Cartier and Van Cleef & Arpels boutiques, is the Dior flagship store. If you peek into the high jewelry department, Dior Fine Jewelry, you will see jewelry that stuns with its excessiveness. Giant opals, acid colors, Baroque forms, gold intertwined with enamel. The person who creates this beauty is named Victoire de Castellane. She is the creative director of Dior's jewelry house, and she is the direct great-granddaughter of Boney and Anna. History has performed an incredible, almost mocking somersault. The genes of Boniface de Castellane, his impeccable taste, his passion for color, his love of excess, survived. But they mutated. Boney ruined the family by buying such things. Victoire thrives by creating and selling them. What was pathology for the great-grandfather, spending more than he had, became a profession for the great-granddaughter. She monetized the family madness. In interviews, Victoire often says, "I love things that look like they can be eaten." This is Boney's voice. This is the echo of his appetite for life, which cost the Gould dynasty millions. But now this appetite is paid for by the LVMH Corporation, not checks from the robber baron's inheritance. And what remained of the money itself? Of those 72 million of Jay Gould that were supposed to become the perpetual engine of power? They disappeared, dissolved. The mathematics of the curse worked to the last cent. The inheritance was fragmented among numerous children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Inflation, taxes, failed investments, and, most importantly, a lifestyle not backed by labor did their work. Today, the Gould descendants are simply well-off people, but not masters of the world. They have no railroads, no veto power in the U.S. economy. The name Gould no longer inspires awe on Wall Street. It remains only in the names of charitable foundations and on plaques in museums that were lucky to receive crumbs from the baron's table during the sales. Now let's return to the scene of the crime. Paris, Avenue Foch, number 50. If you go there today, you will feel nothing. There stands an elite but utterly faceless glass and concrete residential complex built in the 70s. Diplomats and top managers live here. They have convenient underground parking and heated floors. But there is no magic here. The only thing that physically survived from the Pink Palace is those very huge wrought iron gates with golden monograms. They were bought by the city and moved to the entrance of Parc Monceau. Tourists pass through them every day, without even suspecting that these gates once opened for kings and closed in the face of the man who ordered them. This is a tombstone to ambitions, cold iron that outlived hot passions. And what about the main question? Who won this war? Anna Gould, the Dollar Princess? She got the title, she got the children, she avenged her husband. But did she become happy? All her life she suspected that she was loved only for her checkbook. She died at 86, surrounded by things, but her name in history is forever linked to the name of the man who used her. She remained the wife of Boni de Castellan, not an independent figure. Boniface de Castellan? He died in poverty, but surrounded by beauty. In his memoirs, he wrote a phrase that can serve as an epitaph for the entire Gilded Age. I was born in the wrong century. I was created to spend, but born into a world that demands earning. However, the paradox is this. Today, 100 years later, we remember them only thanks to Boni's madness. If Anna had married a boring American banker, they would have preserved the money, multiplied the capital, built boring office buildings, and we would never have known about them. Boni burned money, but from this ash a legend was born. He converted dollars into myth. Items from his collection today are jewels of the Louvre, the Metropolitan Museum, and the Getty Museum. Those very tapestries and bureau over which Anna cried looking at the bills are now the cultural heritage of humanity. It turns out that from the point of view of the family budget, Boni was a criminal. But from the point of view of art history, he proved to be a visionary. He preserved beauty, even if at someone else's expense. The final balance of this story looks like this. Debit, the lost fortune of one of America's richest families. The destroyed palace, broken hearts. Credit, one of the most captivating stories of the Belle Époque, several museum collections, and the understanding that money is just fuel. Jay Gould, Mephistopheles of Wall Street, accumulated money to protect his children from the world. But he did not account for the fact that the greatest danger lurks not outside, but inside the children themselves. He could not protect them from the emptiness that they tried to fill with gold. We close Anna and Boni's factual dossier. The key that did not fit the door on that cold night in 1906 actually opened to us the truth about the price of wealth. Wealth does not save from trouble. It simply makes the decorations of your tragedy much, much more expensive. And if today you pass by the gates of Parc Monceau in Paris, stop for a second. Listen. Perhaps you will hear the quiet rustle of Anna's silk dress, or the tap of Boni's cane, who still wanders Paris, trying to find that one century where he would be allowed to simply be a king without thinking about bills.